Man, that video makes me so anxious and so peaceful. Good job, Adam. Hey, I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. As was said, this series, Hurry Up and Slow Down. And that is just such a funny phrase. But the truth is, I kind of feel both of those, hurry up and slow down. I was thinking about my kids recently, and sometimes my kids will be like, Dad, we are so bored. Can we please do something? And then the very next day, the psychos will be like, we're too busy. We just want to stay home. And I don't know if you feel that way. Sometimes I feel that way. I look at my calendar and there's not very much on the calendar. And my spirit feels really restless, like I need to be doing more, doing something. And then I'll be very, very busy for a period of time and I'll be like, man, I'm just too busy. I got too much going on. I got to quit everything and move to the mountains. Anybody want to move to the mountains with me? Okay, let's go. Well, today I want to talk about this rhythm that will, I think, God intended to help ease that tension. And you might say, well, rhythm, what do you mean by rhythm? I'm thinking of a repeated behavior over time that adds meaning to our lives. Repeated behaviors over time that gives meaning to our lives. We all have rhythms that we do over and over, and they give us meanings. For some of you, it might be a morning routine. Are you any morning routine people in here? Don't mess with John's morning routine, right? For others of you, it might be the same place you go to eat after church every Sunday. Hurry up and finish, John, so we can go to lunch. Or for others of you, it might be like a day on the calendar, right? That you recognize every year that's really meaningful for you. We have silly, we have serious rhythms, but we keep these rhythms and they say something about us, about what we believe and about who we are. I have an example today. Every fall, the weather begins to change and the birds just sing a little bit louder. The air is a little bit crisper. God is closer in the fall because the Chiefs are about to play football, right? And so for many, many years, I've been a Chiefs fan, indoctrinated since I was a child, but my wife and I have been married for 19 years. And so around this time of year, I'll get inspired and I'll go to the closet and I'll get my hoodie that I bought in 2009 for $10 at Hy-Vee on 119th Street. That's not screen printed, y'all. That's sewn on there, $10. And then I'll get my Zubaz. And yeah, these are so old you can't just wear them because they're threadbare. And I'll get my Zubaz and my hoodie and I'll come downstairs and I'll tell my lovely wife, the Chiefs are gonna win the Super Bowl this year. And you don't know, for some of you, you don't know in the early 2000s how much of an utter declaration of blind faith that was. But every year of our marriage, I tell her, the Chiefs are gonna win the Super Bowl this year. And you know what? I willed it into existence and you're welcome. We are winning lots of Super Bowls. Okay. Well, you can't have my hoodie, you can't have my Zubaz. I am not auctioning them off at the next teen auction. Those are invaluable. Okay. The truth is, we all have rhythms, the silly rhythms, the serious rhythms that add this meaning to our lives. And today I want to talk about this Sabbath rhythm that God has given to the church. It is as old as creation itself. And this Sabbath rhythm is something that God asks every follower of Jesus to do. And so the Sabbath rhythm says something about who we are as Christians, what we believe, the things that we value. And more than anything, I think the Sabbath rhythm communicates to this world that we believe in a God who is good and present in our lives. And I would say this, for followers of Jesus in America, I don't think there's a more important rhythm that we need to be following today. The Sabbath rhythm is essential. It helps us to slow down, to consider what really matters in our lives. It helps us to connect with God. and it provides a sense of delight and joy in our lives. Now, full disclosure, I am a recovering Sabbath breaker. I am not good at keeping the Sabbath. My personality type mixed with my family history, mixed with the things I naturally struggle with, it lends me to being a workaholic. And way too often I can find my value in getting things done or performing or achieving. And the problem with Sabbath, the reason it's so hard for me is that it challenges each one of those things in my life. And so it's hard for me to practice. Several years ago, about 6, 7, I've been playing that for like 6 months. Okay, so 6 or 7 years ago, I was talking with an accountability, you're just mad, Asher, you didn't think of it first. I was meeting with an accountability partner, and if you've never had an accountability partner, it's simply this: asking a friend to tell you the truth and ask you hard questions. And so we were challenging each other to be closer to Jesus. And so he would ask me questions about my behaviors, my actions, my motives, my temptations. And so one day we were talking about Sabbath. And my friend said, hey, John, I have a question for you. What does Sabbath look like in your life? And if I'm honest, I gave him some really lame answer, that I was too busy doing too many good things to practice Sabbath regularly. And as I tried to tell him about all the responsibilities, the wonderful things in my life, I was married and I had kids and I was a pastor and I was trying to love my neighbors and make a difference in this world, I could tell the more I talked, the more my accountability partner friend was not impressed. And he looked through the video screen and he said, John, I think that's really interesting. And I have a question for you. Which one of the other 10 commandments are you planning to break this week? And I was like, well, I have one in mind right now. But I didn't say that. And I found a new accountability partner. No, I'm just kidding. If we're honest, you're like me, right? If we did the whole Kevin hand-raising thing and we're like, hey, like how many of you think you're too busy to practice Sabbath? A lot of us would probably raise our hands because we've convinced ourselves we have too many good things to simply slow down and practice Sabbath. We have little imagination for what a whole day with God would look like in our lives. And some of us fail to understand what a blessing that would be to us, but also to all the people around us. And so today I want to expand your view of Sabbath, and I really want to talk about just four words today. The first is this: stop, second, rest, third, contemplate, and fourth, delight. So here's the first thought. When we Sabbath, stopping our normal activities, we say no to good things in order to say yes to the more important things. If you're unfamiliar with the 10 Commandments, this is the one where God tells his the folks in the Old Testament, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that's in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Did you catch the third line in the commandment? It says, on it you shall not do any work. Not your kids, your servants, your animals, or any of the people in your towns. And maybe you're thinking, oh, my kids, that's fine, they don't work. I don't have servants. My dog sleeps all day. But the truth is, we begin to read this and we think, in 2025, what would that even look like, right? And if we just said stopping for a full 24 hours, it seems so far out of reality that we would say, yeah, when we see the 10 Commandments, this is the one that obviously we can't do in 2025. But I think we can, and I think we really need to. But before we get there, this word Sabbath, if you don't know, in Greek, it's in Hebrew, it's Shabbat. And Shabbat just means to stop. And John Mark Comer has this phrase about the Sabbath. He says, the Sabbath is simply a day to stop. Stop working, stop wanting, stop worrying, just stop. In 2019, I got to a period where I had overworked, and not really rested for a really long time. And I got to a period of burnout. And it was a really difficult time in my life. I had really bad boundaries. And going to that burnout, I had kind of told myself and believed a lot of lies about myself and about God and what God wanted of me, about the people around me. And so at the end of 2019, just spiritually, emotionally, physically, just really, really dry. And if you've been there, the next words, the emotions, you'll be familiar with. I was tired, but more than tired, I was resentful. I was bitter. And I remember looking at my wife and just saying, I don't know if I want to be a pastor anymore. It was a really dark time and difficult time. And thank God for my wife and good friends and counselors and mentors and the Holy Spirit. God slowly, over many months, restored my soul. And I learned a lot about myself during that time. But one of the things I learned was that I didn't know the meaning of Shabbat. I did not know how to stop, how to Sabbath, how to spend time with God. The truth is, that commandment still applies to us today. We are limited human beings, and if we do not stop to Sabbath, we are going to burn out. We cannot just continually produce and produce and produce. Maybe you're like me, and today you're saying, I'm too busy. I have too many good things. I can't slow down. And I would just say, how is your soul? What are the words? What are the emotions? Are you tired? Are you starting to feel a little bit resentful? Maybe there's some bitterness inside. You see, the lie that I had told myself was that I was too busy. But that entire time, a lack of Sabbath was just destroying my soul. So Sabbath includes stopping so that we can say no to good things in order to say yes to even better things. Thought number 2, when we Sabbath by resting, we are living by God's rhythm. How many of you enjoy a Sunday afternoon nap? Yeah, the old timers call it Nazarene naps, right? Well, here's good news. God likes to rest as well. In the very beginning of creation, it says that God rested. It says, by the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from the work of creating that he had done. You may not have caught it, but there's a really interesting phrase there. It says that God blessed the 7th day. And as I was reading this, I thought, oh man, okay, God, I've heard of you blessing people. I've heard of you blessing places. I've heard of you even blessing like creation, but you blessed a day. And some of you are like, oh yeah, college game day. That's a blessed activity. Watch college football day. No, that's not what this means. This means that in the 7th day, God blessed a day, and that day has power to give you life, to renew you. God, from the very beginning of creation, said, if you will live into this rhythm and you will practice Sabbath, you will receive the blessing that is inherent in that day. The second thing God said about the 7th day, he made it holy. And holy means to be set apart, to be different, to be dedicated for specific use. And so when God said, hey, this day is holy, he's setting it apart from all of the other days. He's dedicating it. He's intending it for a specific use. You and I do this all the time. We have birthday parties. We have different occasions. We have something, a trip or something on the calendar that we will put way out there because we're going to say, that's a different day. Well, God said, one day a week needs to be different. It's going to be set apart. It's going to be intended to be spent with me. And so when we Sabbath, we're saying, God, I see the rhythm that you put in to the very fabric of creation. And this is the truth. God intends you for you to rest, to live into this predictable, life-giving pattern. Here's what it's supposed to look like over and over. Work, rest, work, rest, work, rest. This is the rhythm that God put into creation. But so many of us think that we can just work, and then we work, and we work, and we work, and we work, and then we're like, we need a vacation. And so many of us overdo it until we're empty, we're weary, and then we take a vacation we can't afford. We come home, and we're more empty than when we left. This is the reality, that the Sabbath has power to give you life. God has created a predictable, life-giving pattern for you. As I mentioned earlier, I have 3 kiddos. They're 8, 12, and 14, which means we have an elementary student, a middle school student, and a high school student. And God bless Olathe School District. They have 3 different start times. And so my wife is a high school teacher, which means I get to take the elementary and the middle school student to school. And so every year at the beginning of the year, the principals are awesome. They send out these detailed maps of the school drop-off process. And they highlight it in the back-to-school meetings. And they talk about it. And they say, we have a simple, life-giving pattern that if you will just fall, it will be blessed. But some of you will be tempted to take a shortcut. And when you do, you're going to break the careful parent drop-off child balance, and all of Olathe schools will fall apart. And so, what happens is the first week, everybody follows the rules. It's great. But then, week number 2, there's a car with a Church of the Resurrection bumper sticker on there that takes a shortcut. It would not be called church, I know you. They take a shortcut, and it ruins everyone's school year for the rest of the year because they've broken the life-giving pattern of the school drop-off lane. Do not do that. Okay. How many of us, though, say, God, thanks. You know what? You're really smart. You did this cool life-giving pattern thing, work, rest, work, rest, work, rest. But you know what? I know better. I'm going to take a little shortcut, and I'm going to find my own life-giving pattern. And I can imagine God saying, would you just listen? Into the very fabric of creation, into your own DNA, I created this rhythm of working and resting. Would you just receive the gift I'm trying to give you to Sabbath and live into this? When we do rest, when we practice Sabbath, we receive the blessing of that day. Okay, so the Sabbath means to stop, it means to rest, and it means to contemplate. Here's the third thought. When we Sabbath to contemplate God, we prioritize connecting with him above everything else. I don't know if you've ever thought about your calendar this way, but your calendar is a record of what you value. If you showed me your calendar, I could look at it and tell you your values. And you might say, John, there's things on my calendar that I don't like. You're liking it or not doesn't mean you don't value it. The things you put on the calendar are the things you value. We make time for that which we value. And I just have a question. Have you calendared time with God? I know it sounds silly, it sounds odd, but if we're going to value our relationship with God, is time with God on your calendar? You know, Jesus, he once said this, seek the kingdom of God above everything else and live righteously. And he, meaning God, will give you everything you need. Here's the truth I've learned in my life. When I make God number one in my life, everything else finds its rightful place. Everything else begins to be seen through a different perspective when I put God first. And truly, that's what God's saying when he gives the Israelites the commandments. He's saying, I want to spend time with you. It was an invitation to connect with God. Live differently one day of the week so the rest of the week, the other 6 days, could have meaning and purpose, and they could be viewed differently. God wanted to connect with his people back then, and he still wants to connect with you today. My wife and I learned something after our second child was born that a lot of married couples learn, and that's just simply this. You have to fight for connection in your marriage. Every marriage is headed towards isolation or intimacy and connection. And so we said, we're gonna fight for connection because it's the lifeblood of our marriage. And so we said, we're gonna take a date once a month. Not fancy, but we're gonna do it. And so sometimes it was breakfast, lunch, dinner. Sometimes it was just a walk. Sometimes we could spend a lot of money, and sometimes we had no money to spend. But we said, we are going to put that on the calendar because it matters. Connecting with each other matters. And so to followers of Jesus, I would say, put your time with God on the calendar. God wants to spend uninterrupted time with you this week. He is giving you an invitation. He said, would you spend time with me? That's what the Sabbath is about. And when we say yes, we're saying, yes, God, I accept that invitation. I want to spend that time with you. Okay, so Sabbath, stopping, resting, contemplating, and last, delight. When we Sabbath to practice delight, we receive God's gift of joy. Jesus once said this, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of the people. You know, through the Sabbath, God gives us this gift to stop, to rest, to enjoy his presence, to delight, to experience joy. And for so many in our society, they think they can find joy by consuming more and more. When I went through that time of burnout in 2019, I read a quote that stuck with me since. It says, you can't consume your way out of burnout. If your soul is empty, consuming more stuff's not gonna fix it. I have been watching parents for the last, 10, 20 years because I wanna be a better parent. And so I see what other parents do and I try to take the good and model that and put that in my own life. And when I look at some parents, I can see really good patterns of delight and joy. And when I look at others, I can see poor patterns of delight and joy. For some parents, they're just so busy and exhausted that they can't envision spending time with God regularly, so they turn to cheap substitutes. Substitutes I enjoy, like caffeine, social media, scrolling for hours on your phone, right? These things I find myself doing, but I also look at them and I think, they don't know how to fill their own cup. On the other hand, I see other parents who know how to fill their emotional and spiritual and physical cups. They've learned what it looks like to slow down, to be present, to practice Sabbath, and they know what it looks like to have joy. This isn't limited to parents. All of us have to fill up our cups regularly. We need to know how to practice delight, how to receive joy from the Lord. It's really, really interesting that the 10 Commandments came to the Israelites in a moment in their history when they had just been set free from 400 years of slavery. And I think God instituted the Sabbath in the 10 Commandments because he said, you know what? For 400 years, you have worked every day and not had a day off. Now you're free. The bad part is you don't know how to live free. Without Sabbath, you may enslave yourself to productivity and work because that's all you know. And I think God looks at Americans today in 2025, the freest people in the world, and he says, I don't think you know how to live free. You need to stop one day a week. Otherwise, you're gonna consume your soul into oblivion. You're gonna work and produce until you are weary and burned out. And God says, I have a gift for you. A gift full of delight and joy. When we practice Sabbath, we're acknowledging we have limits. And we're accepting those limits and we're saying, God, I need you. I need you in this day. I need the delight and the joy that you can bring. So in the Sabbath, we stop, we rest, we contemplate God, and we delight. Now I can imagine some of you are saying, what does it look like? I still don't have the imagination. What could this look like in my life? I have so many things going on. And I would just say practicing Sabbath is challenging. The book of Hebrews has a really interesting scripture. It says, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest. John Mark Comer says it this way, there's a discipline to the Sabbath that is really hard for a lot of us. It takes a lot of intentionality. It won't just happen to you. It takes planning and preparation. It takes self-control The capacity to say no to a list of good things so you can say yes to the best. And so I have just really 4 quick recommendations if you're thinking about starting a new Sabbath rhythm. Here's the first. It's innovative, okay? Pick a day. So first, pick a day each week. For the original Jewish people, they practiced it on Saturday. That was the Sabbath. For many Christians, they say Sunday's gonna be our Sabbath. Hey, congrats. You've already started this day differently than you live the rest of the week. So today, you could just continue living in the Sabbath rhythm. For some of you, you'd say, oh my gosh, my work schedule changes every week. I don't have the same days off every week. And I would say, that's all right. The day of the week isn't the most important thing. Connecting with God is. So pick a day each week that you can spend time with him. Others of you might say, 24 hours? Dude, I can't do anything for 24 hours other than watch Netflix. Like, what am I supposed to do here? And I would say, pick 4 hours. Start with 4 hours and imagine what it would look like to spend 4 hours with God. Okay, so first, pick that time each week. Second, make a list of the things that bring delight in your life and plan to incorporate those things into your Sabbath. You might be like me, and sometimes I convince myself that something that is work is really, it's rest, and so I put it into my Sabbath. So I have to have filters, and so some filters might be this. Is this something that brings delight? Is this something that brings me joy? You might use another filter that say, does this feel like something that brings me closer to God? And lastly, you might just say, is this restful? The truth is, you're gonna have to do stuff on your Sabbath day that feels like work. You can't move it to another day. You need to feed your children on the Sabbath, right? So like you have to continue to do certain things. But if there is work that you can move to another day, go ahead and do that. The third, prepare ahead of time. If you're gonna begin a new rhythm in your life, tell the people that are closest to you. Tell the folks in your family, invite them into the Sabbath rhythm. Plan it together. Be clear on what you're gonna do and what you're not gonna do on your Sabbath. And if I could make a really strong recommendation, put down your phone as much as possible when you Sabbath. And then last, ask God to help you. Come on up, friends. Fourth, ask God to help you. The truth is, God is the one that invited you to join him on the Sabbath. And so he is saying, I want to connect with you. Well, you can say, God, help me to love you. Help me to spend time with you. Help me to learn what it looks like to delight in a Sabbath rhythm. When you do this, you begin to see small changes in your life over time. Little by little, a Sabbath rhythm begins to change who you are. And with God's help, we can be people that keep the Sabbath.